Before I start my story, I want to introduce myself and make a brief backstory. My name is Nicole. I'm 30 years old and I'm from a medium sized city in the Midwest. I have been working at this local small diner in my hometown for about 6 years, and I was actually introduced to this place by my dad, who actually is a close friend to the owner and my future boss, Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter was actually also an old family friend, and I consider him as an uncle, since he has been around since I was a little kid. When, but when I had moved back to my hometown, which I'm not going to mention for privacy, he heard that I had moved back home and I was out of college, and since I had some college debts to pay off, he actually offered me a position as a waitress at this small diner that he owned. And when my dad actually told me about this, I was like, well, this is something that's not bad. I was not expecting an offer a job so fast. But since Mr. Carter is an old friend of the family, and and I was considering him as a part of the family, so I actually accepted the offer. He actually had a few other staff there, including an old friend of mine named Jane. I was very surprised that Jane was among the staff. So when I told Mr. Carter that Jane is an old friend of mine, he smiled and said, "Well, she can be your teacher to show you around how these things work around here," he said to me. And I didn't bother that, and Jane was actually very pleased to have been showing around. And since I told her I actually had really much had a great time in college, and since she never actually went to college herself. But anyways, throughout my years and I have been working at this small diner, I have encountered a few strange people over the years, like some homeless people that were actually friendly, and some were a little bit, maybe a little bit rude, but also some crazy drug addicts, something like that. But there was only one guy that really frightened me for a while. And for this story, I named him James. James at the time was around the same age as me, but I also should mention, around the time I was actually in a relationship with a guy by the name Eli. He was my boyfriend, but later my fiance. But I also should mention this. I never gave any sort of hint to this guy, James, that I was interested in him or even tried to flirt with him, because every time when he showed up, I was always polite because it was part of our customer service. Because, I mean, it's best to be polite and friendly toward the customers than rather being rude and mean. That means if you're that means no more customers will show up. That means my boss, Mr. Carter, would have been not polite, would have been pleased that we made our customers to just no one don't want to show up. It all happened around lunchtime and on a Wednesday. We only had a few handful of customers at a time, and I was just walking around to make sure the customers had a good time, asking them if there was something else they wanted to order or anything. But when I wasn't doing that, I was back back in the kitchen to help them around there when this young man walked up and sat down by the table, and I walked up to him. He was, according to Elise, well, he was quite handsome. Uh, he was between mid to late 20s, I would guess maybe 25 or 28, I would guess. And he has short brown hair, blue eyes, well dressed, and well polite, well mannered. I asked him what he wanted to have for the lunch. He asked for a burger and some fries, which I wrote down and went to the kitchen. And as I did that, after that, I went back to him and just small talk, because Mr. Carter didn't mind if we did have a brief contact or brief chat with customers if we had only a few, because it was only a good thing, because if the staff was polite and always friendly towards the customers. They will always come back with another time. And I asked him if he is local. He said yes. He had been away from town for a few years since he went to college, and now had recently moved back though, in that he was 25. I was really surprised, but he looked a bit really well dressed, and he asked my name, and I said, well, I put in my name tag. Nicole said, that's a beautiful name. I thanked him for that, and he said his name was, well, which I would call him James, just for more privacy. Um, I asked him what he was doing for work, and he said he is working in an office building not far from here, and now he's for his lunch break. So, and he asked me how this place is, if it's really that good. I said, yeah, and the food is always good here. After a moment, his food was ready, and I went to get it, and he said, enjoy, and I went to take care of some other customers. After he had left, I went to his table, and I found a tip, a $20 bill. That was really a little bit surprising, but I never usually get maybe one bill, maybe $1, or maybe as sometimes even $10. But a $20 bill, that was really surprising. But I actually wasn't mind. The rest of the day, me and Jane were just small talking, and she did point out this guy, James, actually had been at this place before when I was not working. She was a little bit quite surprised that I didn't ever seen him before. But I asked her if he was local, and she said yes. He actually had been to this place about for maybe a few months. And ever since then, I did notice that James came to the diner for a few times, maybe a few times in a week, and he's always asked for service instead. But when I wasn't even there, he did actually add either Jane or some other staff. But he was always polite towards them. But one that after about maybe a few weeks, I've been encountered James. When I walked up to him after he sat down, after he walked in, I asked what he wanted for the order. He usually asked for, this time he asked for just a burger but no fries. And I wrote it down. After I went to deliver it, when I was talking to him, just for a brief moment, then he asked me if I would like to go out with him. I was a little bit surprised because this guy was only about a few years younger than me, but I didn't mind since my boyfriend at the time was, well, while Eli was only like a year younger than me. So I just didn't think that wasn't an issue. But I told him that I was flattered, but I was already in a relationship at the time. He smiled with a little bit frown, but he said understood. And well, he couldn't known if he didn't ask me. But he asked me then if I would like maybe just go out, just grab something to eat or just a drink, just as friends. I said perhaps maybe one time, but right now I'm quite busy with my work and I had to prepare things for myself. And he understood, and I returned later with his dinner or with his lunch. And after he left, there were this $5 bill and a note, and it was his name and his phone number, and said, "Call me sometime." I was a little bit surprised because I did tell him that I had a boyfriend and I was not looking for anyone else to be with. Even though that, I took his note and threw it in the trash and just nothing. I didn't mention this to Jane or Miss Carter because it wasn't really much a big issue. I mean, this is not the first time a guy asked me out while we're working. And they usually stop when I tell them that I was already a boyfriend. But only one of the guys before James did try to keep asking me at least two more times. But when I told them I was not budging, and I was happily taken by a guy, and he stopped. But I did notice that James started to show up at the diner every single day in a week, from Monday to Friday. Since I don't work during the weekends since that's my only time of the day off. But today, this week, I started to realize that he had started to show up every single day. But one particular Thursday, it was really full of people in this diner. After took his order, he was expecting me to show back walk back to him and start talking, but I didn't. And in fact, he found out that I was ignoring him. And when I went back to take his plate after he left, no tip, only a note said, "Why did you ignore me this time?" Question mark. I was really surprised, but the next time when he did show up the next day, I did tell him that when he about the note, and I said the reason why I didn't talk to him is because we were quite busy and we don't have much staff, and I can't just stay around and talking to each customer for like a few minutes because we will there was a full diner, and my obligation is to take care of every single customer. And my boss, Mr. Carter, he would have been happy otherwise if I spent a few minutes for each customer, because if I did that, other customers would have to wait and wait. And that is one thing I can't do. If we only had a few customers, then I could. And he understood that, and he apologized because he felt that I was just ignoring him because I was like, why would I ignore my customers? I didn't. And not on purpose. And if I would do doing that, my boss would fire me if I did. And it was true though. But I started to realize that even that James has started to show up every single time, I was like starting to realize maybe did he had a crush on me, because ever since then he tried to make a small hints that he would like to go out with me, but even though he never actually asked me directly, but only like if I had a girl like you, I would like to just take her out, make her feel happy. But I always said I'm taken, and I said, or I could say that maybe, well, I mean, this guy could probably the girls you might find probably appreciate. But he never get the hint that I was not budging this until one evening when I get off from work, when I got to my car, when I noticed there's an envelope on my windshield at my car. I was like a little bit surprised. Maybe it was from Eli or maybe Jane or maybe a parking ticket. But then parking ticket it wouldn't make sense because the parking lot behind the diner was actually privately owned, and Mr. Carter would make sure that we didn't get any tickets there. But it was actually an envelope that contained a note. But at first, it wasn't signed by anyone, only your secret admirer. I thought, could it have been Eli? But then, why would he do it? And it had also, I realized it could have been him because he was at work. When I was working, he was working. And it was impossible for him to just do that to show up because when I was getting off to work, he was still at work. He doesn't leave his work shift until like maybe an hour later after me. So it's not like him doing it. And his work is across town. So it's not like he would do it. And Jane, I don't think she would. And Mr. Carter, if he wanted to tell me something, he would do it directly or in his office. But not like this. So I immediately rolled out Jane, Eli, and Mr. Carter. Who could it have been? But when I said secret admirer, I have no idea who this could have been. Because there was only a note says just only a short message that I love your beautiful eyes. Your beautiful smile make me feel happy. And every time I see your smile make my world just feel bright. Signed, your secret admirer. The notes that didn't happen almost every time. It had happened maybe a few times in a week, but it was almost probably the same message. Also signed the secret admirer. Nothing else. I really started to get to wonder who in the world could it have been. But one particular other evening, on a Friday evening, I kind of got out I realized there was no note. There were no note this time, but flowers. It was like not the flowers that you get from a store or any flower shop, but flowers that you can pick on the ground. I was getting freaked out this time. Who in the world is doing this? I realized it had to be James. But it was nothing that I could have done to prove it because there were no cameras in the behind the diner that where the cars are. I mean, I should probably ask Mr. Carter to have it installed just in case, but I should have remembered this. But after I get home, I forgot about it. Even the next day when I got to work, I forgot to mention this, and I hadn't even told anyone, not Eli, Jane, or Mr. Carter, because even though I did suspect James could have been behind this, but it was nothing I could have done. There was nothing they could have done either because without any actual proof or even if anyone caught him doing it, this wasn't also the notes could have been left at my car at any time. It could have been during the daytime or it would be just before I end my shift. It's impossible to tell exactly. But after this has been going on for at least a few weeks, I started being feeling stalked. But one day, one day when I get home from work, I realized, or at least noticed, a package by the front door. I was living in an apartment with my boyfriend Eli, but it was no, there was no. When I picked up the package, there was no sign of any postmarker on it, no stamp, no address, no even return sent, no return address on it. Just a simple brown package, just with my name on it. At least my first name. I was like really surprised by this. So I took it in and I opened it, and well inside was only a teddy bear with holding a heart, and there were a note that hope this is a good sign of my true affection is my affection, my heart, my love for you, my dear Nicole, signed, but this time was not your secret admirer. There were no signed by the name or anything, and it said only P.S. I will tell you who I am soon. I was getting freaked, and when Eli got home, I told him everything. And in fact, I had saved every single note that I had got from on my car. Now this, Eli was actually at first mad at me because not I didn't tell him. But he said I don't blame you. And he told me because when I told him I didn't know what it believed. At first I thought maybe this was just some sort of prank from Jane or anyone. But as it continued, I realized it wasn't a prank. And I wanted to tell him, but I didn't know how he would react. I first believed that maybe that James or that Eli was going to break up with me or something. But he said, I would never do that. And he actually gave me a hug. And I was now realized, now that the stalker knew exactly where I live, and in fact, that time when I talked to James at work, I never told him anywhere where I lived. Even though this is a medium sized town, there were no signs that I never told him any direction where I lived, unless that he followed me after I left work. But that could have been it. That could have happened at any time. I wasn't really not sure what to do. So Eli suggested I go to my boss the next day to inform him what has been happening. And sure enough, I did. The next day when I got to work, even though it was my day off, but I went to work anyways, and Mr. Carter was like, Nicole, what are you doing here? You don't work on Saturdays. No, but can we talk? It's quite important. Sure, let's go to my office. And at his office, he was always polite, always smiling. But after I started telling him and until I finished, his smile turned to almost very concerned look. So how long had this been going on? He asked. few weeks at least, or maybe more. I don't know, or maybe a month. I can't be guaranteed. I can't say for sure exactly. I said told him. And then I suggest maybe that he could install some cameras in a parking lot behind the diner, if to see if they could actually capture the one who had been doing this, and perhaps, but not mentioning this, that there is a camera there, and perhaps try to make it to look hide it as possible so that it does not be invisible. He actually agreed with me on that one. And then during the weekend, he actually had a camera installed. The only ones who knew about it was me and Mr. Carter. And he even showed me where this camera was located on outside. So for next couple of days afterwards, when I get back to work, things started back as normal. James showed up as normal. We have our decent conversation, even though he never actually gave a hint that he was the stalker. But I knew in my heart, he is a stalker. But even when he was at work, I was always polite. And I was getting worried because even though for during that first 2 weeks after the camera was installed, there were no sign of anyone near my car. No one. So maybe the stalker slash James has stopped, or maybe had noticed the camera. We wasn't sure if we weren't guaranteed sure of that. But he had it. For luckily though, because after on the third week after the camera had been installed, we did notice there was one person near my car just before, maybe in half an hour before I end my shift. But we couldn't see if it was actually him because it was dark out. Even though this camera had a night vision function on it, but this person had a hoodie which covered most of his face and his head, and it was impossible. And this person even just took off, or at least walked off quickly after this. And I was getting scared because that note said, "I will tell you who I am by tomorrow." I was getting a bit weird. I was weirded out, scared, freaked out, terrified, worried all the same time. And even Mr. Carter told me to take a day off. But I couldn't. Because if I did, this stalker, or perhaps even James, thought maybe that he had only been figured out. And I told him, I can't. And if I did, I told him the reason. And he agreed. But I told him that Jane, or that he will be around as much as possible. And by next day, when I got to work, I even had told Eli, and he was very surprised, but he agreed that was probably for the best. But what I didn't expect to happen that same evening when I got home, Eli actually proposed to me over dinner, and I said yes immediately. And I had a big smile when I got to work. As soon as I walked in, Jane saw me smiling. It's like, "How are you?" And whoa, something happened to you last night? "Well, you can say that much," I said, a big smile again. And I told her, "Well, congratulations! It was about time he did ask you." "Yeah." And Mr. Carter, when I told him about it, he was like, "Girl, you are lucky to have such a great guy in your life." I smiled and said thanks. And we actually, Jane and I talked about it almost the entire day. We talked about future plans for the wedding and all stuff. When James walked in and sat down, he actually overheard me and Jane talking about, yeah, I can't even understand that he actually did it. Yeah, I mean, he actually asked me the question last night, and over dinner, I said yes, and I can't even believe that he actually proposed to me. I couldn't. James noticed that James was smiling when he heard that. He looked a little bit surprised and a little bit almost angry. And I said, almost in a whisper, "He's here, isn't he?" She nodded and said, "Well, I should probably take care of the customers, and yeah, probably best." So I walked up to James, and I asked him what I wanted to order, And he was like almost angry. How dare you? I was taken off back because he had never acted like this before to me. What do you mean? How dare you? I put my heart to you. And then that statement alone made me realize James had been the one. James, what? I'm talking about your supposed boyfriend proposed to you? Yeah, he did. And I have showed him the ring and that I'm now engaged. And I have been telling him for weeks that I have a boyfriend. I never lied about it. And I've realized that you had been lying to me the whole time. And I told him once again, interrupted him. I never lied, and I never did anything to try to flirt with him at any kind of way. And just then he just stood up and said, I cannot believe it. You are a freaking liar. And then he smacked my face and just walked out. Jane and Miss Carter saw this happen, and they asked me if I was okay. I was like, yeah, there's nothing to worry. He probably did to start if I should probably ban him or if he's gonna ban him from Judas Diner. I said no, but he should probably done it because things would only escalate. James he stopped almost entirely to show up at the rest at the small diner, but when the times when he did show up, he sat on a different place that only took orders from Jane. When I asked him, he just completely ignored me for I didn't exist. So I left, and Jane said, "Wow, that has been different." And every time when I went to sit to his table after he left, there's only just one or two notes after that. It's like, "Your friend is a liar. Nicole is the biggest liar, a cheater. I never cheated on him, and that was only also escalated because now I get more notes on my car signed J as James because now I know that he was him. And it's like difference. I'm gonna kill you when you least expect it. You broke my heart. You broke my dreams. You broke my heart and dreams repeatedly. And Eli was getting a little bit now quite serious, and he actually told Mr. Carter to have this guy banned from this diner and make sure the police will be involved. And he agreed because now they had a lot of evidence that this guy was the one. But before we had the police get much involved, I was actually off my duty. I had just clocked out from the diner from my shift that evening, and Eli had a day off, and he was going to pick me up from work because my car was in the repair shop at the time. I was some issues with the brake, or I don't remember what it was. And suddenly a car showed up, and I thought maybe it was actually Eli. But I noticed that when I stepped closer, it wasn't Eli's car. It was actually James. He had actually stepped out, and he acted calmly and smiled. Hey, you ready to ride? No, my fiance is going to pick me up in a few minutes. I'm fine. Ah, come on. I know that we'll drive you on the way though. That also confirmed James knew exactly where I live. But how do you know where I live? I never told you that, James. Ah, easily. I followed you home one day. That confirms it. James, stay away from me right now. But come on, you belong to me. We belong together. Then he actually walked up to me and went on the knees and proposed himself. But I said no and started backing off. And but just then he got up again and looked at me angrily. How dare you? You belong to me, woman. You will obey me. I was stunned. He expected me to be like a servant to him. That is one of the lowest guys had ever told me. But I was once again backing off from them. But as he was getting closer, I heard a car horn honked. I looked, and it was Eli. But it wasn't just Eli. Even Mr. Carter was there with him. and they actually walked up to James and told them to stop. But then James pulled out a pocket knife and said, "Back off! She's mine, not yours!" He screamed with an almost lunatically way. This was a whole new behavior, but as they was doing this, I managed to call for 911, and they actually told me, and the operator told me they had a cruiser or a squad car not far from the location. And within the next 2 to 3 minutes, two police cars showed up, and they managed to arrest James. Me and Eli presented all the evidence that we had at home, including Mr. Carter with the tape recordings of the events of he showing up, and now this. We managed to get a restraining order against James, and he actually gets served for at least 2 years for attempted murder and stalking and other crimes I don't even remember. Turns out, even on that at the time, he was in possession of meth, and he was high as a kite at the time when he was doing this. So James had gotten in a few years in jail, and during the time, me and Eli, we actually moved to a new place, a bigger apartment, even got married only a year later. But that was the last time I ever saw James or even heard of him. And even if James would show up, I will make sure that he will stay off because now I have the license to carry a weapon. And if James were even there trying to do something, I would not hesitate to warn him that I am armed. For that, James, stay away from me, please. I don't hesitate to defend myself this time against you.